So it's officially the YC88's second birthday with me, and in this video I want to go over what it's been like over the last 2 years playing all of our festivals, clubs, and tour dates with this, how it's acted, and how it's been on the road all that time, things I love about it, things I would change. Let's dive in and check it out. Hey guys, it's Steve from Featherlight Studio, and in this video I want to go through a little bit about how the YC has been over the last 2 years on the road full time and what it's been like through each of our festival seasons. So for the last 2 years it's been crazy, and we've been very fortunate to have been able to play 70, 75 dates for each one of the seasons. And through the whole thing, the YC's been with me from the start for those 2 year periods. So I want to go over a little bit about what it's been like to work with and what it's been like to deal with this compared to some of the other keyboards I've had, not just Yamaha's, but a couple of other ones as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is durability, just overall robustness. This is one of the things that was really different from a lot of the keyboards that I've owned in the past. Before I had this, I had my Stage 73 Nord, and that was a very different experience. It was great, had great sounds in it, but a lot of the buttons and just wear and tear and overall things weren't quite as robust. I had a couple of the knobs and switches go out on me through that couple-year period, and that is the one area I will say about the Yamaha that's been really different. It's been unbelievably robust. I think, it's very similar in terms of design and stuff. It doesn't have any exposed corners. Some of the rolling boards I've owned in the past, the keys themselves actually stick up a little bit past the frame itself. And in a busy, crowded stage environment, when you're ripping stuff on and off, either between acts, playing with multiple bands, or if it's just you in a club and you're trying to navigate around people, that kind of stuff, that was a real problem because I was always nicking the edge of the keys and that kind of stuff. This is very kind of, just everything is very streamlined. The whole design of the board itself is just incredibly streamlined. And that's really, I will say, has been a testament to how this is held up. And plus the switches and knobs on this are really robust. Like even things down to like just, the drawbars. On some of my other boards, my rolling board, for example, they were super loose. I mean, super. They were like computer keyboard loose. These feel very much like a B3. They have the same ratcheted stops for each one of the foot markers, and you can't mess them up easily. Like you can't hit them accidentally when you're jamming on a solo or something. They don't fly out of the positions. So in that regard, the buttons are a little more beefy, and the rotary dials and the switches themselves are really beefy. And that is one thing I will say about these. These mechanical buttons themselves are pretty stout. And in that regard, it's really been a joy to work with because I haven't really had to mess with anything. I'm pretty anal about taking my stuff and cleaning it, every couple of gigs, especially if we've been playing a lot of rural areas and that kind of stuff. I did this with all the boards I've had in the past as well. I usually keep a can of like compressed air around, and I'll go through and try to blow out all of the, the connectors and the open slider, holes and stuff. But even under those conditions, like I said, this has just been a dream to work with. So in terms of just straight out durability, I would give this a 10 out of 10 just because it's really been the only board I've ever had that has been that, dependable over a really grueling 2-year tour schedule. My Mox F8, which is the one here in the background, great keyboard, much lighter, so that was great, but not nearly as durable. In fact, I actually played the keyboard part in the center. I actually played some of the contacts out, and I had to pull it apart and switch some of the rubber contacts on. They come in octave strips, and I had to switch those out for the end that I don't play nearly as much for the center because I just literally wore it out. But in this regard, for the YC88, this has been super durable, and all of the zones really have been remarkably durable because I play it pretty hard. I'm not a light keyboard player. I'm kind of a banger, and so this has held up remarkably better than the Mox did. So in terms of durability, yeah, I would say this has been a real pleasant surprise, and I'd say 10 out of 10 in that regard. And the next category I want to talk about is actually manufacturer support. A lot of keyboards get released, and they're great boards to work with, and then maybe the manufacturer does, one, maybe two firmware updates throughout the life cycle of the product. Man, the YC has been great in this regard. It's had 5 since its version 1 release, and some of those have been groundbreaking. So for example, the version 1.20, that was a groundbreaking change for all the YCs universally, because it changed the Leslie effect dramatically. Like, the original Leslie effect was fine for some things, but it wasn't super believable when it came to just a straight up comparison to, a real Leslie, or even a great copy of it. But version 1.20 changed the landscape and put in one of the industry's best Leslie simulators that I've ever used. Much better than my Nord, much better than the pedals that I've had. It's just been a huge groundbreaking change, and it's made this so much more competitive with other boards that have Leslie style effects, specifically, really authentic sounding B3 and A100 style effects. And not just that, it added a ton of other stuff. So I've done complete videos on each one of the firmware updates throughout the entire life cycle of the YC, and I'll leave those in the links below so you can check them all out, because they all have very specific update changes and add new features. And it's not just, changing a button here or there, or just fixing problems. They add dramatically new features, things like true FM synthesis and things like that the board never came with to begin with. So these are big changes for the YC. All YC users really benefit from them. So in addition to killer new sounds in firmware, they also add new functions, entirely new physical functions to the board itself. So I'll leave that info so you can check it out, and you can go through each one of the firmwares and see which one applies to you. I would highly recommend, obviously, updating to the latest firmware. And I also have a step-by-step guide on how to change your firmware safely so you don't screw up the board, but more importantly, you don't lose your sounds you worked so hard at creating in the first place. And I'll leave that in the links below as well. One of the other most important things I think about really any keyboard, especially if you're a road player and you're doing a lot of different kinds of gigs, is storage. The ability to back your board up. Thankfully, the YC makes this super easy to do. And again, I've left some info in the links below about how to go about, storing all of your previous live sets and patches. But this is something that I do on a pretty regular basis, because most people that have boards make changes while they're playing. If you're playing in a live scenario, or even if you're playing in a rehearsal scenario, you're always kind of tweaking stuff and coming up with different sounds that you like, and you want to remember them, and so you're throwing them into your live sets, or you're throwing them into your patch memory. I always keep a USB key handy with me in my case at all times. And I also have, right in the board itself, I have a USB key that's in there permanently. And I'm always writing these, one as a backup and one as my live backup, all the time. So that no matter what happens, I have a carbon copy of my entire board set up here. And that turned out to be pretty useful in 2 different scenarios. We played one really rural gig where we were playing on a generator. And it was great for a little while until the generator had a hiccup and somebody actually unplugged the feed to us. And, all the gear is digital, and a lot of the PA stuff was too, and it just sent this huge, electric spike through everything. We lost a bunch of stuff on stage. The YC powered down. When I powered it back up, all of the patches that I had were gone, and it was back to factory. And I just had that instant moment of terror, oh my God. I mean, the factory patches are great, but they're not, in any way related to our set. And all my live sets are arranged in the way that I use them, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, this thing was a lifesaver. It was super easy to basically just go back in, load all the patches in a matter of seconds. I was back up and running. which is more than I can say for the digital board they were using at the time for front of house, because that was a nightmare. That got completely zapped, and all of his presets and stuff. So while I was back up and running fairly quickly, he was still scrambling to create basic scenes, basic compression and EQ and everything for each channel and getting the sends going the right direction and stuff. The other thing that's really been helpful is when we've played gigs where we flew and we didn't have cartage, I was able to just bring my key. We could rent a YC in the city that we went to, and I instantly have my board with all my stuff. And we don't fly very often. We do a lot of regional dates here in the Northwest, so that's not terribly common, but it was super awesome when we needed it, because I was literally able to just bring my setup, plug it in, load all my patches, and I was good to go. The board was instantly my YC. So one of the other things I get asked about a lot is storage. Like, how do you actually get it from gig to gig? And I tried a bunch of different kinds of gig bags and things like that. And I finally landed on a Gator case. And this guy is actually a 76 note keyboard case. It's not an 88. All the 88 note keyboard cases were massive. I mean, literally massive. They were like that much, taller, this much wider. By the time you put a keyboard this compact and, form-fitting in this, it's swimming around. And you have to pack a bunch of stuff in there to get it to work and, to have it arrive safely and stuff. So the one cool thing about this particular case is this actually fits in almost like it was made for it. I'll leave the make and model in the links below so you guys can check it out. But I bought this same 76 style keyboard case for a lot of my other cases, including the Mox F8 that I have back there. And it's fit them perfectly. So you might have to add a tiny piece of foam here or there to make up the difference, but this really just fits in this case like ideally. And it's the most important part is the end-to-end fit. This way is always going to be a little different because each keyboard is a little deeper than the other one. But this fits in here. It's got these TSA style locks, which if you do end up having to fly, are mandatory, so you can't get around that. They're great. They're quick and dirty in terms of usage. And as far as the case itself, the end of it is kind of like compressed or dense foam. And the board itself is almost exactly the dimensions of the width of that. So it literally fits in like it was made for it. And then I just got a couple of extender pieces of foam for the back there. And that's not so much because the board needs it. It's just so that I don't know if you can see, but I've got a little space there. And what that does is it keeps the back of the board from bumping all the way up against the case. Because I have this USB stick in, this position and it's in there all the time, I don't want it bumping up against the back of the case when I'm carrying the board or it's getting transported or wherever, because that would damage this. So this way it leaves a little bit of space for that, and there's still more than enough room. Even with this, the board only comes out to about here. So I have enough room for like my pedals and stuff to sit like this against the board, and I just have some foam in there. Maybe, if you're doing a ton of flying and that kind of stuff, you might want to consider like a full ATA case that actually has plywood and that kind of stuff. But keep in mind, those are heavy. In fact, those cases would weigh almost as much as this board, and this board is already heavy. So this is a real nice compromise. It's absolutely done everything for all the gigs we played, and we played a lot of like rough and tumble stuff. Had other people loading our gear. That always frightens the crap out of me. But it has worked great. It's super, sturdy. It's built like a tank. And when this is in it, it's gotten this to every gig, without fail. And next, I want to talk about just the flexibility of the board itself when you're playing live. This is a really kind of underrated thing, and you don't realize it until you actually get into a lot of different kinds of circumstances. And you realize just how many problems this thing can actually solve. So one of the biggest by far is the ability to take, an XLR cable and go straight to front of house without affecting your own onstage sound. So for example, in my onstage sound, I have my whole stage sound self-contained with 2 stereo speakers and a mixer that come back to me. And I don't want to change that configuration for every gig we play. and I don't want soundmen coming up and changing that configuration either. So I just take an XLR cable, and either one or two, depending on how you run, stereo or mono, goes out to front of house, and boom, they can do whatever they want with it. Saves me having to have a DI box. I don't have to show up with any of that stuff. And it's not that I minded showing up with DI boxes. It's just that if we played gigs where I forgot one or whatever, I had to rely on the sound crew to have it. And if it was smaller gigs and venues, they don't always. And the sound out of here is drop dead pristine. So, you know, I don't have to worry about things like ground hum issues and voltage issues and stuff like that. It sounds phenomenal straight out. If you run in stereo, take both of them out, you're good to go. And I can keep my stage setup exactly the way it is without having to change anything. And that's a huge thing. I can't really stress this enough. To be able to show up to every gig and always have your sound be exactly the same. You know, guitar players have had this for years. They get an amp that they love and a guitar they love, and that just becomes like a part of them or extension. Keyboard players, you know, largely end up having to sort of take what they get at gigs, and especially in bigger sound systems and bigger gigs, things like that, where the sound companies change a lot. You'd be surprised how dramatically your sound system can change. And just running it back through the monitor in mono or through your in-ears isn't always the best scenario because it's not your sound. I use a lot of pedals, not all just Yamaha ones. In fact, I did another video about this, and I'll leave this in the links below as well, but this is actually a Moog pedal. But one of my favorite ones to use with this board by far because it's heavy, it's got a great adjustment for throw, and there's some resistance in the pedal. This is a big deal. It means when you first put your foot on it, you're not just slamming the thing, you know, to max. So this has been great, but the thing that the Yamaha YC does so well is it allows you to use a lot of different kinds of pedals, expression pedals, you know, not just for volume, but for all kinds of effects. And the YC effects are mapped really, really well. And you have a ton of control over that. And one of the other things that changed in one of the latest firmware upgrades is if you don't run your keyboard in stereo. Now, I know most people do, but if you don't, if you want to run the organ out of the board by itself in mono, like the way an actual, you know, B3 would work, and run it into a Leslie, you can. Because you can change the output configuration now in the YC so that these outputs act separately. Now, I mean, they can be in stereo, but you can also have them be separate outputs. So you can run, you know, just the B3 out of one side, and you can run that into, you know, a Leslie simulator or even a real 122 cabinet if you wanted to, and you had the converter. And that is a huge and massive change because previously it always ran in stereo no matter what, and you didn't have a choice. And one of the final things I want to go over is actually the sound of the board itself, especially with the last firmware updates that we've had. It's added some phenomenal sounding patches in firmware. Some incredible acoustic sounds and some killer FM stuff. So it's added some amazing things. You know, there's a lot of great sounding keyboards out there, but what's unique about this that I've experienced is that the samples themselves are incredibly high quality sounds. And what that kind of relates to directly is dynamic range. And I never thought that was a big deal until I played a board that had a lot of dynamic range like this one does. And what I mean by that is that when you jump on something, you have this just incredibly full and lifelike sound that is just incredibly present. But then when you back off, it doesn't just get quieter. The instrument itself changes, much like a real piano does or a real Rhodes. When you jump on it, the entire dynamic range of the instrument is used, and you have these big, gigantic cinematic sounds. But then when you back way off and you play incredibly quietly and really delicately, the instrument gets delicate with you. And that's as a direct result of really, really well sampled instruments. And the other thing I want to say too is the Master EQ. Man, this is one of the things that I use almost every gig we play. It's not meant to be part of the patch process, and that's on purpose, because the Master EQ's function is to be able to adjust your sound, what you hear directly, from gig to gig to gig. And when you play a lot of gigs, especially a lot of kinds of gigs, going from like tiny little clubs one night to like major stages the next night, and then maybe, festival outdoor gigs, the sound changes radically. And this allows you to instantly grab a couple of banks, 3 major frequencies. The center one is parametric, and so you can dial in or out a problem frequency in a really boxy room or a really boxy hall or whatever instantly just by hitting this. You don't have to step through a bunch of stuff. It's that immediacy solving problems that makes this so worthwhile. And I can't say enough about it. It seems like a simple thing, but it really isn't, especially when you're playing live. The ability to react to something immediately on stage without having to run off stage or get a hold of like the monitor guy or get a hold of the front of house guy, to solve problems or, to bring a ring, or a resonance down that's bugging you. Having it right here, like dial it in and take it out and you're done. That is a real game changer. And it's one of the things I've really grown to love the most about the YC series boards is it allows you to do that pretty much effortlessly. All right, so not every board is perfect. In fact, no board is perfect for sure. And let's talk about the things that I might like to change on this if I could. Obviously, the thing I miss about my Nord is the ability to load in your own sounds. And that's really the one thing that the YC doesn't have, is the ability to load your own samples into this. And that's, I think it's a trade-off because there's so many built-in sounds on the board in memory already. You're pretty likely to find something that you're going to use or that's going to be close. And everything that's in there is really good. So it's not like they put a bunch of low-res trash samples in there just to fill up the space. It's from the motif library, and it all sounds phenomenal. So I have no complaints there. But yeah, I mean, if I'm asking, yeah, it'd be great to have, the ability to load my own samples in, only because maybe we have show-related things or vocal-related, backup vocals that need to be triggered or whatever. That might be handy for this. And I would say the only other thing really that I would necessarily, I don't know if I would change it so much, but I might think about improving, is the one thing I love about this is having the built-in onboard audio interface. I always realize how powerful that is, especially during sound checks, or setups or things like that, where I want to audition something or I want to throw down an idea really quickly. But if I had one more wish, it would be to be able to use those audio inputs as real audio inputs, meaning sampling. Like I could actually sample into those audio inputs, not just use them as a mix, convenience, but actually use them to get sounds into the YC's effects engine. It'd be great to be able to plug a mic into one of those and then record directly through it. But for the time being, the audio interface that's built into it works incredibly well, and it's awesome for iOS devices and sound modules, things like, just about any sound module that you can get on an app, Chord module, any of that kind of stuff. It works seamlessly through this. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff I like about this, obviously, but I've played a lot of different kinds of boards and a lot of different kinds of manufacturers. I was a huge Kurzweil fan for years, a huge Roland fan and Korg fan for years, and I landed on this after having my Nord for a long time. So this isn't just, I'm not just a Yamaha fanboy. For me, it really does have to work. Like, it has to do all the things I need it to do, or I don't care who makes it. It's just this particular one just happens to do most of the things that I really need. So for the time being, this is my daily driver, and I really do love it. I really do feel like this is my sort of instrument, that it's customized and made for me because it's so flexible and I can make it really behave kind of the way a guitar player does, where they find that perfect combination of an amp and a guitar, and like that becomes their sound. That's what this has become for me. It's really my sound. So, hey, if you learned something more, if this was interesting or helpful in any way, please hit the subscription and notification bells. It really does help keep the channel going, and it helps me make more videos like this. Stay safe. Be creative. Add something creative to the world. I could really use it right now. Take care. We'll catch you guys in the next video.